The Ohio River flows steadily, its waters gleaming under the morning sun like liquid steel, an unyielding witness to the battles and sacrifices that shaped the Ohio Valley. For centuries, it was more than a river, it was a lifeline. To the Shawnee and other indigenous peoples, the Ohio's currents were sacred, connecting villages, nourishing crops, and carrying the rhythms of life. Its waters flowed with stories passed down through generations, representing balance, harmony, and survival. For settlers journeying westward, the river represented a formidable barrier to cross, a gateway to opportunity and the promise of land, a land that they believed held limitless potential. Yet with each flatboat and raft that navigated its waters, the divide between the two worlds deepened. This clash of ambitions sowed the seeds of conflict, and both sides would ultimately pay a heavy price. This story explains the intertwined fates of pioneers and the Shawnee Indians, revealing how the Ohio River became not only a lifeline, but also a battleground. It is a tale of survival, betrayal, and enduring spirit. An exploration of how the river that gave life also became a boundary drenched in blood. Join me as we uncover the history of the Ohio Valley, where the Shawnee and settlers faced unthinkable hardship, and the river itself carried the weight of their shared fate. A land of abundance. Shawnee life before the wars. Before the settlers arrived, the Shawnee thrived in the Ohio Valley, living in harmony with the land. Villages like Old Chillicothe and Piqua were bustling centers of life. Women planted fields of corn, beans, and squash, while men hunted deer and turkey. Rivers teemed with fish and forests brimmed with game. The seasons guided their lives, and every part of the land held meaning. Every tree, every bend in the river holds a memory, one elder would say. This land is not just our home, it is a part of us. Children played by the river, while elders shared stories by the council fires, discussing the importance of protecting their land. As settlers began to arrive in the mid-1700s with axes and plows, the Shawnee were bewildered. Why do they destroy what they do not need? A young boy asked, watching the trees fall. This was more than just an intrusion. It threatened the delicate balance that had sustained them for generations. Old Chillicothe, now Greene County, Ohio, was a key settlement for the Shawnee, a hub for diplomacy and resistance against the encroaching settlers. It was here that Tecumseh, a pivotal leader of the Shawnee, was born. Growing up in Old Chillicothe, Tecumseh witnessed the increasing conflict between his people and the newcomers. Hearing tales of courageous leaders like Chief Blackfish and Chief Cornstalk around the fires, he was motivated to unite the tribes of the Ohio Valley to defend their lands for the future. The fight for survival, resistance, and sacrifice. The settlers didn't just take land. They dismantled a way of life. For the Shawnee, the stakes were far greater than crops or hunting grounds. They fought for their homes, their traditions, and the survival of their children. Each passing day brought more settlers, more cabins, and more forests felled. The Shawnee leaders, faced with the destruction of everything they held sacred, knew they had no choice but to act. The air must have felt suffocating, heavy with the tension of an impending storm. For the Shawnee, every decision carried unbearable weight. Should they wait and watch their world disappear, or fight? Chillicothe in flames. The struggle came to a head in May 1779, during the Battle of Chillicothe. Colonel John Bowman led the Kentucky militia against the Shawnee capital, determined to crush their resistance. The attack was brutal and chaotic. Shawnee warriors, led by Chief Blackfish, fought fiercely to defend their village. Flames consumed the homes as warriors and settlers clashed, the sharp scent of burning wood mixing with the metallic tang of blood. The cries of battle echoed through the forest, a cacophony of courage and desperation. Chief Blackfish, a towering figure of resilience, fell in the fray. His lifeless body was carried from the battlefield, the soil beneath him soaked with the sacrifice of a leader who fought for his people until his last breath. For the Shawnee, his death was a devastating loss. Yet even as Bowman's forces seized 163 horses and set the village ablaze, the Shawnee's spirit remained unbroken. Standing amid the ashes of Chillicothe, one could see the charred remains of homes, the remnants of a life that once thrived. The loss was immeasurable, a reminder that the fight for survival often demands everything. The devastation of Piqua. The Shawnee faced an even greater challenge in August 1780 during the Battle of Piqua. General George Rogers Clark led the Kentucky militia in a devastating assault on the Shawnee village. Artillery fire shattered the wooden stockade protecting the settlement. Splinters flew through the air as families ran for cover, their cries drowned out by the relentless roar of musket volleys. Shawnee warriors fought with unmatched ferocity, but the militia's overwhelming firepower left them with little hope. For days, Clark's men burned the town and its surrounding fields. Smoke rose into the sky, blotting out the sun as survivors fled into the dense forests. Piqua, once a symbol of Shawnee resilience, was reduced to ashes. The destruction was total, a stark message to the Shawnee that their homeland was no longer safe. Silent triumphs and lingering scars. As settlers pushed deeper into the Ohio Valley, the Shawnee turned to raids as their primary form of resistance. Before dawn, warriors moved silently through forests, their steps purposeful and their resolve unshakable. Each raid was more than an attack. It was a declaration that the land still belonged to them. When warriors returned with supplies, livestock, or tools, their faces showed brief triumph, but the relief never lasted. They knew retaliation would come, swift and merciless. In settler cabins, fear became a constant companion. The rustle of leaves, the distant cry of an owl, every sound felt like a warning. Families lived on the edge, knowing a sudden raid could end in death and destruction. Places like Tuscarawas saw fierce Shawnee retaliation. Homes burned, fields trampled, children murdered, and families taken captive. For the Shawnee, this fight was survival. For settlers, it was a living nightmare. During this time, land companies and the Army began constructing forts along the Ohio River for protection and to provide shelter for militia and armed forces. These forts would serve as a way to maintain their foothold in the valley while preparing for battle. Brutality on both sides. The savage reality of war. The escalating conflict was marked by unimaginable brutality, not just from the settlers, but also among the tribes. The story of Jenny Wiley, captured in 1787 by a band of Shawnee, Cherokee, Wyandot, and Delaware warriors, offers a chilling glimpse into the savagery that had taken root. Her children were struck down in front of her with tomahawks and then scalped. She clung to her last remaining child, an infant no more than 15 months old. Forced to carry her youngest, Jenny was led on a grueling march through forests and rivers. She was forced to march for days carrying her child, who was beyond consoling, having screamed and cried for days. The captors debated killing her remaining child, and when the Cherokee chief seized the infant and ended its life, Jenny could do nothing but watch. This violence was not isolated. Settler families lived in constant fear. Each owl's cry in the dark could be a signal, each rustle of leaves a warning. For settlers like Jenny, survival came at the cost of innocence. For the tribes, raids were both retaliation and a statement. This land is ours, a battlefield of dreams and ashes. In the Ohio Valley, the land became a patchwork of dreams and devastation. Settlers clung to visions of a better life, but the charred remains of cabins told a different story. For the Shawnee, each burned home or slain warrior was a scar on their sacred land, a place they fought to preserve at all costs. "We fight because we must," said one elder. "This land is our heart. To lose it is to lose ourselves." Yet the settlers pressed on. Fortified towns like Marietta, which had Fort Harmar, and Cincinnati, which had Fort Washington and Fort Hamilton, sprang up, pushing deeper into Shawnee territory. Leaders like the Chief Blue Jacket, a prominent leader of the Shawnee known for his fierce resistance against American expansion into Native American lands in the Ohio Valley. His leadership and tactical skill made him a central figure during a pivotal period of conflict between Native American tribes and settlers. He worked closely with other leaders like Little Turtle of the Miami tribe to organize and lead resistance efforts. One of his most notable victories occurred at the Battle of the Wabash in 1791, near present-day Dayton, also known as St. Clair's Defeat, where Native forces inflicted a devastating loss on U.S. troops led by General Arthur St. Clair. It remains one of the worst defeats in U.S. military history. General Arthur St. Clair led about 1,400 U.S. soldiers against 1,000 to 1,200 Native American warriors under Little Turtle and Blue Jacket. The U.S. forces suffered devastating losses, with over 600 killed and 271 wounded, resulting in a casualty rate near 60%. In contrast, Native American losses were minimal, estimated at 21 to 50. This battle forced the U.S. to reassess its strategy and boost military forces. Tecumseh urged tribal unity in response to the growing threat. The last major Native American resistance occurred at the Battle of Fallen Timbers in 1794. The Shawnee's last stand. Fallen Timbers. Near present-day Maumee, Ohio, Shawnee warriors joined Miami and Delaware allies to face General Anthony Wayne. Known as Mad Anthony, Wayne led his troops with precision, their disciplined ranks and artillery overwhelming the native coalition. The forest shook with musket fire, the cries of the wounded mingling with smoke and ash. Shawnee warriors fought with unmatched ferocity, but the settlers' firepower proved too great. As the battle ended, the native forces were forced to retreat, their unity shattered. The defeat at Fallen Timbers was devastating. It was not just a military loss. It was the beginning of the Shawnees' forced removal from the land they had called home for generations. In 1795, under the Treaty of Greenville, the Shawnee ceded vast territories, including their villages along the Scioto and Miami rivers. Tecumseh's words reflected the weight of their surrender. "We give this land not because we wish to, but because we must. Remember this sacrifice, for it is the price of peace." Shared legacy in exile. The Shawnees' journey westward was one of hardship and heartbreak. Families trudged for weeks through harsh weather, carrying what little they could. Mothers comforted crying children. Fathers shouldered burdens, both physical and emotional, and elders sang the old songs to remind their people who they were. Yet even in exile, the Shawnee rebuilt. They named new towns after their leaders and sacred places, carrying their history with them. But scars remained. The Ohio Valley, once a land of harmony and abundance, had become a crucible of suffering. The settlers saw the valley as their promised land, a chance to build something new, free from the constraints of the East. Yet every field plowed and cabin built came with a price. The disintegration of cultures, the destruction of villages, and lives forever altered by violence. For the Shawnee, the settlers were invaders who took what was sacred and shattered the balance they had cultivated for generations. For settlers like Jenny Wiley, the tribes were a threat that haunted every step, every shadow. Trust was impossible, and violence became the only language understood on the frontier. Two perspectives: dreams and sacrifices. The story of the Ohio Valley is one of two worlds in collision. For the Shawnee, the land was more than property. It was part of their identity. For settlers, the Ohio Valley was the key to opportunity and prosperity. Yet in this clash of dreams, neither side emerged unscathed. Families were torn apart, villages and cabins alike were reduced to rubble, and the land bore the scars of battles fought for survival and belonging. Today, as we stand on the banks of the Ohio River, we are reminded of the cost of change. The river still flows, carrying with it the weight of lives lost and legacies reshaped. The battles for the Ohio Valley were not just about land. They were about identity, survival, and the right to dream. This history endures, challenging us to remember the sacrifices made by both sides and urging us to honor a legacy written in blood, resilience, and hope. If this story has touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to help keep these stories alive. Join us next time as we explore more untold histories of the people and places that shaped our world.